Driver instructors of Reddit, what's the most insane thing you've seen a student do? Obligatory Nadi, but my friend ran over a cow on a driving lesson. First time driving manual, they panic revved the engine to redline and dropped the clutch. The car launched, then they slammed the brake without taking it out of first gear or pushing the clutch back in. I'm going to do the reverse of this question, aka I was the student and the instructor was crazy. Where I live, driving lessons are mandatory to get your license because there was a lot of fatal accidents involving new drivers in the early 2000s. Those lessons are provided by private driving schools and cost a fortune, over $1,000. It was one of my first driving lessons on the actual road. As I approached the intersection where I had a green light, I noticed a car speeding and about to pass on his red light. I slowed down to avoid a collision, and the instructor started yelling at me for slowing down, even after the car ran the red light. He would have crashed into us if I didn't slow down, no doubt about that. She gave me shit during the rest of the lesson, including very rude insults, calling me a dumb bitch and such. When we got back, she got into their office and started talking shit about me to everyone, how I'm a completely stupid useless shit, etc. I immediately requested to see the owner. She started telling him I was a reckless driver, that I shouldn't be on road, that I was lying to get out of trouble, etc. She forgot that all their car have a front and rear dashcam with audio recording. They have them for insurance purpose. I wanted to cancel my full course at this point and go to another school. Owner apologized for what happened, refunded the full amount, personally became my instructor, and fired that woman on the spot. Don't know what the fuck was her problem, and I certainly hope she never worked as a driving instructor anywhere else. I was the passenger when the incident happened. Our driving instructor forgot to mention she had issues with diabetes. She passed out when the worst of the three of us were driving. The kid driving panicked and immediately went off-road, through a fence, and into a field of cows. We hit a cow. The car was pretty much totaled. And since this was in the middle of nowhere, we didn't have a cell signal, so we had to find the owner of the cows to call 911. Our instructor was put on leave. The cow somehow walked it off and only had a few scrapes to show for her getting hit by a fucking car. And we all got to redo our training a month later with a new instructor. Not a driving instructor, but this guy the first no drives a Crown Victoria, which is what most police cars are for those who don't know. The instructor, who was black, got in the car with him, and the first thing the guy said to the instructor was, "So is this your first time riding in the front of one of these things?" The instructor got out of the car and refused to test him. Not a driving instructor. Just live outside a house where the driving instructors love to teach the students to parallel park. It gets so bad, it's like coming out to watch a movie and how close they get before the driving instructor has to step in. Which is a lot. Mr. Francis is great at stepping in at the last possible second. Makes it worth buying popcorn and drinks to watch this nervous kid's almost crash. Note, they cannot see us. We live in a very shaded spot by large building. We sit in our screening porch. We don't try to make too much noise. We have no reason to make the kids more nervous. Kid ran over a raccoon, stopped the car and threw it in the backseat. He continued to drive like nothing happened. Not a driving instructor, but a friend of mine failed his driving test for taking the handbrake off and rolling the car backwards onto the road before turning the engine on. I bet the instructor would have been very surprised. While I may not be a driving instructor, my best friend is a racing driver who is very helpful. He will gladly help anyone with their track skills upon request because of his passion for driving. One day I met a friend who also happened to be a girl that was just the type of person my racer friend would be interested in. She, however, was not a great driver because of her immense fear of driving and actively sought out help for her issues. With my all-knowing wisdom, I tried to set them up by getting my racer friend to give her some lessons. This setup did not go as planned. My biggest mistake was telling my racer friend that a girl wanted lessons, but not specifying what type of lessons. When the day of the lesson comes around, my friend asked the girl to go to the local track. This confused her, and she asked my friend why they had to go to the track. He said it was the best place to learn and she kindly obliged. They show up there, and my friend says he'll take her for a couple of laps first to show her how to do things. They get in the car, and he takes off like a madman. This girl is immensely scared of speed and driving, so she starts bawling her eyes out and is paralyzed by fear. My fiendish friend does not notice this and continues to thrash the car around for a full lap. Only after this does he notice her state of being. He immediately stops and exits the track. She, still crying, jumps out of the car and proceeds to call me to pick her up as she is too scared to drive home. This all happens while my racer friend is sitting in the car mortified and unable to get up due to shock or realizing what he has done. I come and pick her up, and she refuses to talk to him for the next 2 months or so. At this point, I realize I should probably stop trying to be a wingman. I also realize that my friend is a forgiving person as he did not run me over. Yes, I did create an account just to post this story. Not a driving instructor, but my own instructor told me a horror story a few years ago. One student of hers had a panic attack while going around a roundabout and passed out. The car didn't have dual steering, just brakes. So my instructor instinctively slammed the brakes on, causing them to get hit from 2 directions. A car ran into the back of them and another into the side as it tried to merge. They were both fine, luckily. My instructor told me that he once had a student who put the handbrake on in the fast lane of a motorway when he told her to brake. Edit, bad grammar. I once saw a kid in a student driver car throw an entire pizza box out the window while driving. I was in the back seat of a fellow student driver and the driver's ed teacher. We got T-boned by some dude who ran a red light, and the driver's ed teacher, who's ex-military, got out and ran after the guy who sped off. He ran a good quarter to half a mile before he came back and said he got the guy's license plate and car model and called it in. So as a child I learned to drive race cars on racetracks because my dad was a race car driver. When the time came to have my first official driving instruction on the road, I got picked up by the instructor. I was far from excited as this was child's play for me at this point, but whatever, I wanted my license. Not but 5 minutes into the session she wanted me to turn down a one-way street, going the wrong way. I objected, but she persisted, so as any 16-year-old would do I said screw, let's roll. We made it about 3/4 of the way down the block before a lifted Chevy came down the block going the correct way. She was terrified. I threw it in reverse and backed into a driveway, and after the truck went by I followed him out. A few years later, as an instructor at a performance driving school, I had a student in his new Z06 Vet. At about 160 miles per hour down the long back straight, I felt a really bad vibration and made him pull into the pits. He was pissed because I made him stop. I got out and found that his do-it-yourself brake job didn't work. The vibration I was feeling was the brake caliper bolt getting smacked by the spokes of the wheel at triple-digit speeds heading into a brake zone. That's when it set in what could have happened. Former instructor and manager of a driver's ed here. My husband was also a driver instructor there too. Usually the students were great. BC it is optional in our state. Where I worked it is part university town, but there are a lot of rural towns that we served too. The farm kids already knew how to drive. Some of them were better than me, lol. The story that sticks out in my mind is a driver's exam my husband did. The kid backs out of the spot and goes to turn out of the parking lot. But he was so nervous, I guess, that he almost turned in front of an oncoming vehicle. My husband had to slam on his brake to avoid a collision on his side. If they had been hit, my husband probably would have had some nasty injuries. Anyways, that was, of course, an automatic fail, so he had the kid go out onto the street and turn back into the parking lot at a different entrance. Kid almost started to turn in front of yet another vehicle. They get back and come in and tell the kid what he will have to do to eventually get his license, and he leaves. My husband fills me and then goes in to teach the class that was just starting. All of a sudden the dad comes in and starts tearing into me. My husband comes out and this guy tries to argue with us for like 30 minutes until I had to threaten to call the cops. His poor son is sitting there, head in his hands, looking like he wanted to cry. I felt so bad for him. But that was crazy. The bigger problem was the drivers around our students. The cars we used were obviously marked as driver's ed, but other drivers would be rude and dangerous anyways. After I left the company, we found out that one of the vehicles had been hit during a lesson. So they were driving and some guy on his cell phone turned into them. The student did absolutely nothing wrong, in fact, he did everything right. Well, the instructor, a good friend of ours, had just had a stint put in a few days earlier. The force of the crash knocked his chest into the side console and it ended up tearing the artery. He died a few hours later. So some asshole on his cell phone caused the death of this amazing guy. Although, if I had still been the manager there, I would have not allowed him to go out on drives yet. But still. Love you, Paul. Thanks for watching. What would be your response? Leave it in the comments and see what the others say. Please also like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Until next time, take care.